and then I have to go off and find my notes, which are located in a slightly different place on this computer than my regular computer. But give me 1 second to do that. If I go here and then there, oh, I don't know. Gary, do you want to start giving us an update as to where we are with things?
Sure, be glad to. Let's see,
Great.
make sure. Yep. Looks like my audio is coming through okay.
It sounds great. Yes.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I don't get the green frame of my screen, so I wasn't quite sure. Okay. So far as the rules and stuff, there really haven't been any changes or modifications other than a couple of minor tweaks in the past couple of weeks. I did solicit some input from a few people that are familiar with HAMSI and understand what we're doing. And I asked them to get back to me by the end of the month. But again, in a second, I'll post the link to the rules on the test server in the chat, and I'm be more than appreciative if anybody wants to take a look at them and get back to me and say, yep, they all look good, or they're not, they need some work, or you got some suggestions, comments, or questions. The other thing I've done is, obviously, we want to get this thing on everybody's calendar, and to facilitate that, I found out it was actually pretty easy to embed a couple of calendar files in the FAQs. So also on the test server, which I just sent that link out in the chat, near the top, there's a couple of ICS files, which I've been testing on my Apple devices, fiddling around with different time zones and things, and they all seem to work properly. So if somebody, especially like, in Utah would be great, especially if they have a Windows machine, would open those FAQs, click on those two ICS files, or at least one of them, and compare the times that end up on your calendar versus what's in the notes, the UTC times for the contests in 23 and 24. I'd appreciate that. The other thing is I did send a note out to Becky Schoenbrunn at the league on Sunday. I haven't heard back from her yet so far as her interest in some of the print media. And I did send something out to Rich, W2VU at CQ, and he came back with an enthusiastic yes. So now we've got to figure out what we'd like to put together for him at some point. I can do that.
Mary Lou and Gareth live within a mile of Rich.
Oh, really? Okay.
So they can go meet him for lunch. And
We can start banging on his door.
Yeah. And I can get over there pretty easily too, because my mom lives about a mile from him too.
I've been in a lot of states, but New Jersey is not one of them. That's right. He's in New Jersey, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been there yet. So someday. So anyhow, so we'll have to figure out what kind of message we want to get out. I can start working with him in the next couple of months and get something going there. I think that was about it from me for today.
That's
like I say, I'll put a link to the rules in the chat, and people can take a look at them.
That sounds great. Did you get feedback from Rob Robinette about the Whisper stuff?
No, I did not hear back from Rob at all.
Okay. So I know he was one person we wanted to ping about that.
Right. I can remind him. I'll be glad to remind him. The other person we had spoken about or with a few weeks ago was Gwen Griffiths.
Yes.
We were talking about the higher precision station locations and Whisper and whatnot. And Gwen was not available this week, but he can be on the call next Thursday. So I said that would be great. And hopefully we'll hear from him next week.
Okay, that sounds really good.
Do you want me to forward the emails that I got about those topics beforehand, or do you want to just wait for him to come and do the talk?
If you want to send that stuff to me so I can read up on it ahead of time, I'd appreciate that. I just stuck my email address in the chat.
Got it. I will send that on to you because I had asked about it because I'm doing some Whisper research.
Yeah, the more I can be prepared, the better.
That sounds really good. Okay. So do you want to go ahead and put the rules in the chat now and we can get some feedback from that?
Yep, I just want, it should have just gone out.
I got it.
Hmm. Let's see. Should we do a screen share with this again then and have people go over them once more?
Yeah, I'd be glad to put them up there.
Okay.
One thing that this brings to mind at the very top, we were asking people to join the main Hamsci mailing list. We still, of course, active is the Hamsci-Eclipse list as well. I'm not sure, Nathaniel, if we want to encourage people to move over to the main list and kind of blast out a message there, or because I mean, out of the, I think there were 300 and some odd people on that. I'm not sure
Yeah,
they're all going to want to come over, still interested in how you want to do that.
I can certainly do that. We can do that more once we get the Eclipse page actually set up.
Okay, yeah, we can hold that off for a little while. That's fine.
Yeah, I just have one brief. I just scanned through it here through your link. Thank you. Is when it comes to modes, could we have provisions for FT8, FT4, and FT8?
Well, those are certainly welcome because we're talking about all digital modes. And a little bit later on, in fact, there's a link.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay.
Sorry, I just saw as you were scrolling through.
No
Yeah,
problem.
digital modes. My bad. I thought. Yeah. Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and later on, there's a link on how to set up N1MM with FT8. So in case people have not done that before, that's directly from the authors of N1MM. So it should be pretty reliable.
Also, Ham Radio Deluxe.
But Ham Radio Deluxe isn't really a contest logging software, so I know it can kind of do it, but it's not going to have the capacity to use the templates for the SEQP or to generate the correct Cabrillo file.
Okay. No problem.
Not
But
to
thank
mention
you
it's
for
a
the
pain in the
info.
neck.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's the same thing with DX Lab Suite too. It's more of a logging program, and it's great. And there's a gateway from N1MM to DX Lab Suite, but it's not going to be a good contesting logging program either.
Yeah, I do that with Ham Radio Deluxe. I'll use Ham Radio Deluxe as my regular logging program. I use N1MM for contests, and I have it set up so that every time I log something in N1MM, it'll automatically post it to Ham Radio Deluxe also, so it keeps my logbooks in sync.
Yeah, it works great. I've got the same thing with the DX Lab Suite, so it's a good way to go.
While we're on that subject, in case some people do use N3 FJP software for both general logging, and he does have a lot of contest modules. But in looking at, I believe his name is Scott, and looking at his website, he really is discouraging requests to support any additional contests. One, because he wants to go through a major rewrite. And two, he says, oh, well, I'd like to see contests be on the air for 2 to 3 years so I can see how many people are entering, and then I can decide where to put it in my priority list and so on and so forth. So I looked into that one, but like I say, got a little bit discouraged. So we'll stick with N1MM for now.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. If we focus on doing one and doing one well, that's great. And then if others do want to join in after, you know, that's fine too. But this way, you know, we're able to support one properly.
Well, and N1MM is really is internationally, that is the most used.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said earlier, most of your logging programs like HRD and like DX Lab Suites, they have gateways that automatically puts all of your contacts over. So yeah, N1MM I think is the only way the real focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So once we've got the rules up on the live Hamsci site, I can contact the N1MM dev team and update the QSO party for the, the proper year and so on and so forth. So that'll happen in time.
Mhm. And even when we put these rules out on the main website, we can still leave them in draft rules up until like a month or so before the actual event, so that if we need to do a little tweaking, we can.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah. Steve Serwin, you sent something out earlier about the bonus stations. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Okay, I just had to find the thing. I was trying to find those user files to send. Sure. Am I on the air now, finally?
You are on.
Okay, so anyway, gosh, all I ought to do is just share my screen. Can I do that?
Yes, you can.
Here's the email I just sent out. So anyway, we've had some success with these little waveforms that we used for WWV, that in particular, the little chirps, the short chirps, and the one cycle pulses. You can't get a direct time of flight, absolute, unless you have GPS DOs on both ends. But you can get time difference of arrival of multipath modes. And both those short pulses and the little chirps work pretty well with that. If anybody's interested, I can send you the report that I gave to Christina when she had to report to NIST. So in keeping with the motif that we wanted to have this a contest-like thing, we could have bonus stations, special event bonus stations that would transmit special waveforms, which would have these chirps and a few pulses in it, and identify them with the stroke WAV on the end of it, or I don't know, K5 SEQP or whatever we do to identify them, and then award bonus points for guys copying the waveforms and sending them in. So I made a first cut at the rules and sent them to you and Gary and to Ward. So it said, special event stations will be on the air during the eclipse. It will transmit a special waveform designed to make scientific measurements on how multipath propagation changes over the course of the eclipse. Stations can be identified by call signs containing the stroke WAV appended on the end. Example, WA5FRF stroke WAV. I'm almost sure that we're going to have to use AM on this because the chirp is frequency sensitive, and if the two radios aren't on the same frequency, it's going to have a frequency offset. It's not going to work. AM doesn't have that problem. Of course, with WWV, that's what they were anyway. So AM mode on specified frequencies will be used to transmit the waveform. In order to qualify, the receiving station must also use AM mode. I don't know how many bonus points will have to be in keeping with whatever else you're doing. Be awarded to participating stations that record and submit the waveforms using a wave capture program. Bonus points will be awarded for each recording submitted as long as captures from the same station are at least 6 minutes apart. We might have several of these stations. In fact, ideally, the stations that send these waveforms would be strategically placed either across the path of totality or along it, and they'll be continually exchanging reports with each other. But in addition, letting these other guys copy them, and that'll give us random directions and a whole lot of additional information. No limit on the number of recordings submitted. In order to qualify, the waveform must be captured at a standard sample rate between 11,025 and 48,000 samples per second so that we can read it. And the recording should contain a legible time axis, so relative time measurements may be made between the different parts of the waveform. might be that if you know the sample rate, you could get that anyway, but sure it'd be nice if it came with a x-axis already calibrated in time, like mine does. Each submitted recording must be identified by the call sign of the transmitting station, the frequency band, date, and the time in UTC encoded in file name. And then we can give examples. Example of acceptable waveform capture and the recommended file name format is shown below. We can give links to instructions on how to connect your radio to a computer sound card. And we could also give suggested wave capture programs that are out there. A lot of them are free. Some of them you have to buy. So we might list a few of those. So this is just a first cut at it. It doesn't really affect the way you're doing other things. It just adds bonus stations.
Yeah. I also think it's good because, you know, I have a number of people who email me saying, you know, how do we participate even if we, you know, don't have a grape or don't want to build a grape, and they sound like they don't want to just do contesting. So this sounds like it might be a good way for them to do something. I think one thing I'm not sure of is the best way to integrate it into what we're doing, whether it makes sense to do it as a bonus station or to have it as a separate category in the SEQP, or to have it as like a separate experiment altogether. So right now we have it as a bonus station. What's that?
Good thoughts.
Yeah. So any ideas on what the best way to integrate this into the general program?
I like making it part of the contest, and a message I meant to send to everybody was, would love to see a YouTube tutorial on how to get set up to do this.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been a proponent of having transformer isolation, but that was with older computers that had, honest to goodness, analog mic inputs, and those are becoming extinct. I just bought a new Lenovo. Even this laptop made by Mac doesn't have one. What you have to do instead is get some sort of a audio to USB converter. So I've got these, like these little things here.
Right.
And these probably have, and I've built these myself, so I know they exist, an electronic transformer. It's just an op-amp circuit that provides balanced inputs that will get rid of common mode signals. And it obviates the need to have a separate balanced transformer going into it.
That's good, right?
Yes, it's very good, because
Yeah.
otherwise you got to build it. I've got a couple of boxes here. Here's one of them I built many years ago. It's got a little slide pod in it. It's transformer isolated, 600 ohm to 600 ohm, and it works great. It breaks all the ground loops and you have no noise on your signal. But these little things here that you can buy from Amazon for less than $10, well, I've never had any ground loop problems with these, even with the laptop power connected. So it's getting easier.
That's really good.
They'll certainly need to test it, make sure it works, but that would be pretty cool. And that would let us watch. We couldn't get, you know, absolute time of flight, but we can see the difference in time of flight between, say, 1 and 2 hops or whatever's there, whatever goes on.
So the idea, Bob Gerzoff is certainly in support of including this in the contest. You have it as a bonus station. How would the advantages of including it in as part of the SEQP is it really then kind of like feels like it's part of the big experiment that we're doing, and, you know, gives it a little bit more visibility that way. How would we want to do the point structure? Do we want to, I think that's what we need to figure out now, to have it be part of the SEQP. How do we really award the bonus points or have it be its own category, or how are we going to recognize it?
One thing in most competitions, there's different groups and categories. And in some cases, those categories overlap in which everybody competes with one another. In
Mhm.
other cases, there's separate and distinct categories and people are more siloed into their competition. So I'm not sure how you would, I mean, we've already got the people making 2A QSOs and we've got the people doing whisper stuff. And we got to add this in there too. We've got,
Sure.
it's kind of hard to come up with a number at the end saying everybody gets, so many points and whoever won, and not that anybody's going to win necessarily.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, so certainly having one way to do it is, have a different category, and, people can enter in on both categories. They could enter in on this wave category. They can simultaneously enter in on the regular 2A QSO category. For field day, they do have some sort of things like this where you have to record a special message from that's coming across the national traffic system, or maybe you have to make like a satellite QSO, and for each of those you get like 100 bonus points.
Right.
Now with this particular thing, it sounds like what we want to try to incentivize is repeated measurements over the path between certain stations, right?
And
if you're,
field day is not a contest.
Well, so neither is this.
And you should view I know it's a contest.
Yeah, so field day is not a contest, but they print everyone's scores in QSTs and everything's awarded points, but it's not a contest, right? I know.
And I set out to win field day one year, and I did.
Right, exactly.
I put 4 transmitters on a pontoon boat, and I was the only one in my class. I
There
won.
you go. But it was not a contest.
Sometimes it's not the number, but the ingenuity that wins. Yeah, and
Right. You need to incentivize, make it worthwhile, incentivize it, more measurements, more points. But I was thinking that you really don't want it to dominate other bases for getting points, right?
Mhm.
But then again, other contests like sweepstakes and stuff, there's some real thought process into how you prosecute that contest. What do I go after? Should I go for multipliers? Do I just make raw QSOs? No, you really got to think about it.
I know.
I mean, the other way to do it is I was getting to, I think, is kind of delineating the scores. Is the people making the 2A contacts and we score them, and okay, there's a 1 to N ranking. And there's the folks doing whisper, transmitter, receive. They're kind of in the whisper group and they get their own ranking. And this would be a third group. So you may not necessarily have to blend them all together from a points point of view. Because they're so radically different.
I kind of like that approach, because then it kind of keeps things a little cleaner. And then we don't have to like go through this. I feel like if we're gonna just award bonus points for this thing, then you kind of have to say, well, how many bonus points is it really worth? And is it worth more points than doing it this other way? And like you said, they're very different things. So if we kind of have 3 different like activities going on and they each get their own category, then then you don't have to worry about it being quote unquote fair, which one is.
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's nice is if you do it this way, I feel like someone who's a CW operator, if they're a CW contest operator, they probably want to focus on doing CW QSOs. And if you're someone who's into this wave thing, you're going to get into, doing that for 8 hours. And it's going to be a little difficult to jump between activities effectively.
Although they could enter more than one category if they wanted to.
Yes, they can. So
Oh, sure, yeah.
People who want to can, but they're not like forced to.
Yeah, I may set a whisper transmitter up in my backyard on 30 meters, but I can still come in here on 20 and 40 and 10 and make all the CW QSOs I want, so.
If we do this too, should we have a recommended band plan? Because like you don't want the people who are doing the wave things, the wave measurements that Steve is proposing on AM, we don't want them getting trampled on by all the people making, phone QSOs.
I would suggest we put the AM stations on the normally used AM frequencies.
Yeah, that would make sense. it would probably make sense. And just like we'd probably put the whisper and the FT8 people on the whisper and the FT8 frequencies, it probably makes sense to have that band plan published with our rules.
Oh, yeah.
Even though they're standard frequencies, it'd be nice to just kind of have them there so people kind of know where to go.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we have to be aware that some of these modes are transmit only and receive only. And some of the modes are interactive, in other words, a duplex.
Mhm.
Because whisper, the AM transmissions are going to be essentially simplex one way, and the whisper is sort of that way, and the two-way communications contest type are going to be duplex,
Mhm.
or at least they're simplex, but they're two-way.
Right, the 2A.
This is more really in the category of like in field aid, you get bonus points for copying the ARRL bulletin.
Right.
I think one thing we got to think about too is how many transmitting stations do we need, Steve, to make something like this effective? Because we got to recruit them and make sure they're on the air. Otherwise, the receive stations will be kind of out of luck.
Absolute minimum is 1. But we'd like to have, like I said, a couple of paths perhaps across the path of totality. Turns out I'm right in the middle of it. It's going to go right over my head, which is kind of neat because
For both of them, not just for one eclipse, for both eclipses.
yeah,
Mhm.
which means I'll be able to do paths along the direction of travel, sideways to it, everything else. But we should try and recruit more stations that could straddle the path on different places. Man, if we could get a dozen, that would be
Mhm.
great. What we need to do is once we figure out what it's going to take is send out to the groups IO or something, somehow advertise for volunteers for people that would like to do it. I know Joe is certainly interested.
Mhm.
So would the transmitting occur in the ham bands? I'm trying to thinking about the rules and the FCC and all that so that we stay legal too. Because we're not monitoring WWV here, we're monitoring other hams, is that correct?
These could
Well,
no, these would be QSOs.
Yeah.
And I just flip a switch and play a wave file into my mic input. And you record it.
Mhm.
It'll last about 10, 15, maybe 10, 12 seconds.
And then you do it the other way and you make sure you identify and everything's good.
Okay,
Yeah, for the point to point, but for the guys that just have to copy it once, they don't have to send it back. They just have to receive it.
Now, let's see. But they would be transmitting back to the other station, just not transmitting that waveform, right?
Let
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about the FCC rules on one-way transmission.
Well, we could make it, you could, the rule that you're trying to avoid is broadcasting, right? You're not allowed to broadcast. But if you
Right.
say, okay, I'm going to be one station that's transmitting to these other stations, but then you're required to have the other stations say that, reply back that they've received it, that should be fine.
That's
Yeah,
okay, yeah.
It is okay to broadcast if it's of interest to amateur radio, such as W1AW.
that's true.
Well,
Yeah,
that's true,
there's
yeah.
very special rules for W1AW. That's written very, very, yeah.
There are other broadcasts. You might check
Yeah.
into it.
Well, I had not planned on broadcasting. I had planned on making contests, but that doesn't preclude somebody else piggybacking and copying. For example, I call CQ, Nathaniel calls me, and I'm sending him the waveform, and Gary out in the wings just happens to copy it.
Yeah.
It's akin to the frequency measuring test.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, it's very, mhm. And it's also similar, and in some ways it's similar to a net too. If you have net control, we'll be transmitting messages that go out to everybody, general announcements to the whole net, and then everyone will have a, I think it'll be okay.
And also the recording being sent back to whoever's gathering the information is confirmation of the one-way contact.
Mhm.
And the waveform carries no intelligence,
Mhm.
carries no information. I mean,
Yeah, so you're not worried about it. You're
That's
not
a little better.
encrypting, you're not encrypting anything.
right.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be a problem. And certainly you're there if someone does, come back and talk to you, you're there to respond to them. So it's not like a broadcast where you just put the switch on. If anyone tries to reply to you, no one's there to answer. It's not like that.
No. Oh, it'll be manned.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any problem with it at all. What I think should happen maybe over the next week, I think it's a good idea, Steve. Maybe you can work with Gary to try and figure out the scoring structure, how we're going to really integrate this into the whole thing. Because I'm pretty happy with how the basic rules are for the main QSO party and the kind of the standard, contest sort of thing. I'm not sure. Yeah, I like this idea of creating the separate categories for like the main QSO party, and then for I don't know what you want to call this, the mode splitting tests, or you have to come up with some name for it. But if you could figure out how to structure it into the whole QSO party as a whole, I think that would be really good.
But now that you mention it, how do beacons operate? All these 10-meter beacons, 6-meter beacons, they're not manned, and they just sit there and transmit call signs and powered letdown tests. And
there's a section in Part 97 that describes the rules for beacons, unattended beacons, and I think they're limited in which bands they're allowed on. I think they're not allowed below either 7 or 14 megahertz, and it's very carefully specified in Part 97. But this would be different because it would be an attended beacon, for the purposes of this. The more you can make it like a two-way transmission, the better. And I think if you had something where different people were sending the waveform and they identify who they are, and then the next person comes up and sends their waveform in response, that to me is a two-way, transmission.
Yeah, it's
Well,
essentially a round table, like you said, a net.
it's a one-time deal also.
Right. Yeah, so it's very different than an unattended beacon.
I've certainly got no problem working with Steve to try to understand how a contact, if you want to call it that, would happen. I think we need to sketch that out and diagram it and be able to describe it so other people can read it and then potentially join in. Once we've got that, I'm not worried about figuring it into the rules. And the point scoring, that'll be easy once we figure out a procedure, I guess.
Yeah, well, we want the files. I mean, they don't get credit unless they send them in.
Sure. The other thing is you get something that's a little bit out of the ordinary. Is this something we want to do a test run, just like the FMTs? You've got test runs and things like that, because you've only got one chance at an ellipse each year. We don't want failure.
I was hoping to have tried this with Joe already by now, but I just got crazy busy with some things going on with work. Got more classes to teach, and that's a good thing. But hopefully within the next few months, Joe and I will send these back and forth to each other.
Yeah, and then you're certainly welcome to have, other tests, at other times besides just the eclipses.
Yeah, I was going to say that for a test of this thing, we don't necessarily have to do it on an eclipse even. It could be any time, because it's our small group would be testing whether or not the technique works.
Yeah, and you probably want to do it at a time. Probably want to do it at a quiet time when kind of a control experiment. During the day when there's maybe geomagnetic quiet, you might want to try it then. You could also try doing it for some dawns and dusks, because one of the things we're very interested in is, how is the eclipse different from dawn and dusk?
Right.
Let me run this through my mind while I've got a minute, Steve, just to make sure I'm on the right page. Now, say we had pick a popular number, 8 stations who are willing to, that have these wave files are willing and capable of transmitting them. The SEQP, or the operating event, starts at 1200 Zulu, and you may be on 40 meters, it's up, 7295 up in the AM band, and you'll say this is WA5FRF transmitting the first wave file, and you would send it. And potentially there would be like 7 other stations behind you that may do the same thing at say 1 minute intervals. And then people could be receiving those. And then you repeat that again in 6 minutes or 10 minutes again later so we could see how things progressed through the eclipse.
Oh, yeah, I had not thought that far through it, but you're right. If we're going to stick on just the AM frequencies, it would have to be time shared. And something like what you mentioned, as opposed to having one person on 7160, somebody else on 7295, and maybe another one. You don't have to just do AM in those things, but that's not a bad way to do it. Is the way you just suggested. Have one guy do it, and then somebody else do it.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not the science guy here, but I'm just trying to think that way you've got a set of data that it's fairly consistent frequency wise, but yet from a time point of view, the eclipse is going on, so you're going to get the temporal change.
Actually, I kind of like that, because if we had enough people, that means that you could just about operate the continuous the entire time. And if you
Yeah,
had
one of the things that reminds me of is possibly having a net of the transmitting stations, and have then the people who are receiving it could just receive it whenever they want to.
Yeah, the transmitter participants continuously copy the waveform from each other. That gives us our fixed paths.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody that wants to record it separately to give us our random contacts can do so, or they can actually make a call. We should call CQ every now and then, or just, like you say, make it a net and leave it open for anybody else who would like to check in and make a QSO point on top of it.
Yeah, I kind of like that net idea.
I'm thinking all the guys that like to run AM and have those old broadcast transmitters in their basements, but get them all fired up. But
Yeah, I'm sure those old broadcast AM transmitters are exactly what we want for a precision frequency measuring experiment.
They're probably not interfaced with the USB either, but anyhow.
The other things is, since we're doing that, we could prearrange and put out on this HamSci webpage an audio file which has the encoding that we want.
Sure.
So people could pick it up and then transmit it.
And that would help with the consistency of the data, I would think.
I think we'd have to do that.
Well, with what I've gleaned from the discussion today, I can certainly create a basic page up in the test server up there, and then Steve send you a link, and we obviously get it out to the whole group next week once we fine tune it a little bit, and then just to see how it looks. I mean, it's a prototype, right? So what the heck?
Yeah.
If I'm way off the mark, tell me that, and we'll back it up and start over again if we have to.
I think that sounds good to me.
I think we need a clever name for it though, but I know we got creative types on here, so we'll have to come up with something. The other thing I've been thinking about is our Solar Eclipse QSO party is becoming more and more of an operating event. I know the QSO party is part of it, and I know that's the name and the catchy letters, but I think we ought to keep thinking that this thing is really truly an operating event, because there's lots of different types of operating that's going on, and lots of opportunities to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the name ought to have TDOA or time difference of arrival or something fancy like that encoded in it.
Okay, got it. See if I have anything else.
Hmm.
Hey, Nathaniel, while everybody's kind of thinking or there's a quick pause, would there be a minute for the non-scientist person in this group for me to ask a quick question?
Of course.
Well, no, because if I'm taking away from what Gary's trying to do, then we can table it for another time. This is for my knowledge. But that weekend is when usually there's a big EME contest, which I've never been participated in, don't know much about. But I'm just curious, how would the solar eclipse affect an EME contest or an EME contact? And I don't want to take too much time away from the group, but I'm just personally very curious on how that communication with the moon and back, if the solar eclipse would affect it like a normal radio propagation, or if there would be something different. And again, if we have other things, you can answer it another time.
That's a very interesting question. I'm not fully certain. Most of the EME occurs on the VHF and UHF bands, right?
Right, it goes
No.
from 50 megahertz up.
So I don't usually I know I'm not an EME person, but usually they don't worry too much about the ionosphere for those contacts, do they?
Not really. I don't think they do. But I was just curious with that signal going all the way to the moon and back, if it would be affected. And I figured with this group of scientists, I would just throw that question out.
Well, are there differences? Have you done EME before?
No, I just was looking at next year's calendar and I was like, I'm really curious if while they're doing their EME, if this solar eclipse would have an effect on the VHF and that type of a radio wave.
Well,
My first impression is to agree with Nathaniel that because the frequency is so high, you're not going to see much. But this is a pretty special geometry. You know, you got this converging cone of a shadow going down there. And if you've ever worked tropo, like on 2 meters, that stuff has nothing to do with the ionosphere and everything to do with temperature gradients.
Mm-hmm. Which you will have temperature gradients here.
Yeah.
And you also will have what's the other thing you're going to have? So I don't know if when working EME, if there's much of a difference between working EME during the day with a new moon versus EME at night with a full moon. Is there?
What about working EME when you're going up the cone of this shadow? I mean, it's the moon that you're bouncing off of, and it's the thing casting the shadow. So the two paths are pristinely aligned.
It's like a whole other. It's a whole other science question.
Right.
Uh-oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
I think this is an interesting question. I want to make 2 points. First off, as somebody who has traveled to a number of solar eclipses, there is a big temperature gradient in the zone of the eclipse. Secondly, I'm not an EME guy at all, but if the sun is making noise on the frequency that you're on, it's going to be right behind the moon, and it's going to add noise to the signal to noise ratio.
So I mean,
not if you're in the shadow.
Well, that's true, actually. If you're in the shadow, but you have to be in a that shadow line is a very narrow line only about 25 miles wide, where you're fully shadowed.
You know, really what you'd like to have is somebody that has a moon bounce skier that's actually on the path of totality and work moon bounce before it happens, while it's happening, and after it happens, and see if there's any difference in signal strength. I mean, on the other end of the extreme, you might have the mother of all horn antennas formed by temperature gradients.
Thanks again. This is the medical guy in the group, so I don't profess to have a much of a background, just a huge interest. So thanks for responding to my question. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's an interesting question, and there
I mean,
are prizes in there.
if there's already an EME contest going on that weekend, it'd be interesting if someone could pay attention to what they're doing, get someone in their community to try and say what the Eclipse is doing to that.
Yeah, it's typically, I think, the third weekend, and this is, well, this may only be the second weekend, so it may be the weekend after, but anyway, be that as it may.
It'd be interesting to see what happens when you go in and out of the shadow.
Maybe they can operate 2 weekends in a row.
UHF is what wavelength again? I forget.
The VHF is 300 megahertz, 30 to 300, and UHF is 300 to 3000 megahertz.
And what? So that's like 10 centimeter.
Well, we started 50 megahertz for moon bounce, which is about 6 meters wavelength, and it goes up to 432 megahertz, which is about 70 centimeters.
Okay. No, I was just out of curiosity, because the famous f10.7 measurement, I believe, came out of, there's some lore in terms of f10.7 because it was discovered using radars, surplus radars from the World War II. And there was some experiment done in Canada back in the late 40s, I think, that had to do with a total solar eclipse and the noise floor. And that's how they narrowed down the source of f10.7 or something. So I'm wondering if, that we may see, there may be something of interest there. So it's actually a really good question.
It would be wonderful if someone could get the moon bounce community to report back on what happens.
Yeah, I'm looking at, just out of curiosity, I pulled up the rules real quick on it, and it says that it goes from 50 megahertz to 1296 megahertz, and 1296 is the highest frequency so far that's been used to bounce off the moon.
There's got to be someone in that community who's also a scientist and might be interested in reporting on that.
Now, if you could transmit at 2 frequencies, you might get TEC on the path.
Yeah.
What's TDC? Sorry,
Total electron content.
Oh, thank you.
I think we should keep that in the back of, I think we should keep that in mind too, though. But I think that would be kind of a different project than this one.
Yeah, that's why I said it was a little off topic, so.
But as I said, it would be really nice if we could get, since that's like a different community, if we could get them, if we could get someone over there to think about it, and maybe they already are, but if we could get them to report on it, that would be really neat.
Do any of those paths of totality happen to cross over like HARP? So we can do
I'm not sure.
HF moon bounce in the shadow.
The sun is really pretty noisy at some of these frequencies, so I would bet they would not be interested to do it at new moon.
Okay, so why don't we bring it back for a minute? So for next week, as I said, I'm really happy with how the rules are looking for the regular part of the contest. We still want to hear back from Rob Robinette regarding his input on the WhisperNet material. I like Steve's idea of doing this other thing, but I think it needs to be, you need to flesh out exactly what you want it to be, and then kind of figure out how it fits in the scoring or the structure of the SEQP. So Steve and Gary, do you think you can work on that this week?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then what I want to do, so I think I'm going to be able to spend a good amount of time working on this stuff on Saturday. I think I will start drafting up a first draft of a grant proposal to NASA. And then I can work on sharing that with you. We're talking about it with you more next week, Gareth. How about that?
Yep, sounds good to me.
Yeah, and then as we mentioned to you over email, it sounds like there's funding opportunities from NSF as well. So everyone knows, NASA has an opportunity that's specific for funding, providing, oh, Rob Robinette's here, for funding Eclipse studies, but they only have about a year and a half worth of funding. And usually what we need the funding for is not just running the experiment, but we also, a large part of the money needs to go towards getting someone to analyze the data and actually bring it to publication. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to hire a PhD student, fund someone's PhD to work on this problem. And that's kind of, what Christina does with the GRAPE project and what Rachel Bodecker will be doing with the GRAPE project in the future. But the NASA funding only has money for like a year and a half, which is usually need a little bit longer than that to, really give substantial effort to a PhD student. But the NSF also has some funding available. So I have to contact the program officers and see if there's a way to coordinate between the two agencies, which from their perspective, the easiest thing to do is you just have the PI write 2 separate grant proposals that address 2 slightly different things. And then from their perspective, it's a very clean thing bureaucratically. But from the PI's perspective, it's a bit of a nightmare. So it'd be very nice if you could just write 1 proposal for 3 years rather than. So I have to talk to the program office, figure out what to do with that. But I'll start trying to put together a text of a proposal that would hopefully pay for some students and some some additional support. Sound good? Great. Rob, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm sorry I'm late. You weren't on my schedule, which you are now. So I will try to be a regular attendee. I don't know that I have anything. I'm sorry I missed everything. I don't know if there's anything I need to contribute here. Oh, one note is in terms of my subject last week about FST4W transmitters, we pretty well established that the $69 QDX from QRP Labs, the same people who make the Ultima 3S that's widely used. This QDX device is almost certainly capable of becoming a very high stability 4W transmitter. With so I think we have solved the transmit problem. I mean, Hans, who over there, has to actually change his code, which is broken right now. But we've done tests with a similar design, the RF0, and it's clear that the little 5351 chip used in both of them can be used to create 4W signals at 20 meters. So that was a major effort. I'm only part of the group that's working on that. But
actually, that just gave me an idea. So first of all, the thing that we do, we have a request for you, and it's a continuation of the request from last week. What we really want from you is to review the current rules and give some feedback as to, are we doing whisper things? Are we doing whisper and integrating that correctly?
Yes, you're right. I thought I had another day. I thought I had until tomorrow to look at your
You can
face.
have you can have until tomorrow. You can have until next week.
Okay.
You can have until the week after.
Okay, but I warn you that I'm gonna make a suggestion that people get lots of extra points for transmitting and receiving 4W.
Okay. So Gary and Steve are working on figuring out how to structure Steve's idea into the SEQP, and so yours may be, worth discussing as well. So I think there's
Okay.
still some negotiation. And actually, what you just said gave me some ideas on how to deal with the bureaucratic debacle that I was just talking about.
Yeah.
And that is, so the bureaucratic debacle is, we want to get enough funding to support a PhD student to study this stuff. But NASA has some funding available for the Eclipse, but it's only a 1.5 years worth of funding, which is not enough to really support a PhD student. And SF potentially has some money, but it's not. But you'd have to write for it in a separate grant.
It's 5 o'clock.
Oh, it is 5 o'clock. But one thing I can do is maybe I write the NASA grant. We can write the NASA grant to support just the standard SEQP. And then we might write an NSF grant to help support some of these more experimental modes, like the thing that Steve is talking about, or the thing that Rob is talking about. We might be able to get additional funding that way, and extend things out. So
good. Help me. Where do I find that document? So that's probably half of the. Is it on your?
Rob, I can send you an email directly with it, with the link in it. How's that?
That'd be great. Thank you.
I've been investigating whisper transmitters that are well controlled, or I've been trying to look around for them. And I wondered if, the ideal would be a GPS disciplined oscillator controlled whisper transmitter. I have found somebody that makes a wide variety of frequency bands, but they are using an oven controlled oscillator that doesn't have the real frequency control of a GPS DO. What are other people finding, and do you have any leads on where I should go for whisper transmitters?
Yeah, for me, if the QDX is, I think, even already well enough implemented for. And it's the right price point and has a very easy user interface, and it's $69. So it's it has a TCXO. So I think that it's stable enough with in a reasonable environment. It's stable enough for the. I think it drifts well under 10 to the minus ninth in a 2-minute window. So it's very much stable enough for almost all the whisper modes, including the 30-minute mode at on 20 meters. So that's seems the best candidate that I know of. The other devices that I'm aware of, the RF0 really isn't a transmitter. It's a development card with a 5351 in it. So I don't think it's a good choice. And nothing else out there, Zactex and so on, don't have TCXO. So they're going to, by our standards, at least by my new standards, they're all not nearly well enough disciplined. I'm not sure if the QDX is actually, it has a GPS section, but I'm not sure, not having one myself, and all of the investigation work on the QDX has been done by Glenn, N6GN, and Gwen, and G3ZIL, and Rolf. I don't know Rolf's call sign, but the three of them have been deeply investigating the different transmitter options. And the QDX is now that we've resolved the question about the modulation that can be made to work. QDX is far and away I think the right choice. it's a $69 kit for an extra $40. They'll build it for you. Another $25 is a case. So I just looked into buying a, you can get a whole one for, for $130 delivered.
Okay,
So,
my research on it is the following. I found two options. One is the Zactec, and Harry over there said that he could get an oven controlled oscillator to really pin it down reasonably, but could not get GPS-DO quality. Over at Tapper, they are working on one that is GPS-DO. I'm not sure how high a quality the filtering is on the thing. In other words, knocking down the birdies that are away from the transmitter. And that's my research on it so far. Thanks.
yeah. I don't think a Zactec is a candidate for what what I'm interested in, at least the very high stability, low spectral width transmitter. So I don't think, the Zactec, I believe, uses a 5351 chip in it. So in principle, it could work, and if you keep the oscillator stable enough, then it might not drift too much in a 2-minute window. But the QDX has the GPS as well as the 5351, and it's a 5-watt output. So you got 17 or 16 dB more transmit power than you get out of a Zactec. I think that's a pretty big deal. I think we might find new propagation events if we were to up the power. 5 watts is a big change from from 200 milliwatts on a Zactec. So I think the power level, it really is a transmitter. It actually has a great receiver in it too, but the transmit side of the QDX really seems it seems to be a real transmitter. It goes 80, 40, 30, and 20. And some people have been using it on, I think, on 17. I don't think there's any reason it wouldn't work on other bands. It's just a function of the filtering, the transmit output filtering. So we're in the midst of encouraging Hans at QSP Labs to invest the time to just fix his frequency calculation code. He's both off by several hertz, and he's not modulating to the different modulation tones correctly. So
what's his company name again?
QRP Labs, QRP-Labs. I can
Right.
put it up in the chat, but I'll put in the chat. I'll put a link to the to his device. But it's in production device. You can order it. It does everything you'd want. It just needs a little tweak on the firmware, and I'm hoping that if that more people, in fact, I was kind of mentioned in the blog post that in his forum that their HAMSI was interested in finding high quality transmitters, and it seemed to me that with the firmware fix that the QDX would be ideal for radio science work. So I think with unfortunately, from my perspective, the one bad thing about the QDX and all of his products are that they're closed source. And so that means we're dependent upon him and his team. He has a real business. It's not a side business. It's literally, he has an ongoing business for making these various QRP transmitters, transceivers, and so on. So so there's good things about that and bad things about it. The good thing is he really does have support, and he's going to be around for a while. The bad thing is that you can't go in and actually fix things that are important to you, but less important to him and other users. So the more users who express to him the importance of fixing something, I think the more likely he is to be able to implement it. So anyway, that's what I would, that's where I would invest my time. Well, that's where I am, and several of us are investing our time in getting the Hans to fix the QDX, and I think it's the best candidate for in general for as a whisper transmitter, most flexible.
I'm going to
And-
jump in here again for a minute.
Yep.
Because I need to go in a second. So people are welcome to stay and keep chatting after I leave, but I would like to just make a few quick notes about what we talked about today. So, and I'll type them on the screen. Hopefully people can help me fill in things I forget. But basically, so Gary, AF8A, again, showed the current draft of the SEQP rules and asked for comments. The general consensus is that we are happy with my typing is awful, rules for the main SEQP, the contest like portion involving two-way QSOs on phone, CW, and digital. Consensus is that Steve Serwin, WA5 FRF, proposed a method for having stations measure time difference of arrival of different propagation modes by sending wave files over the radio. He proposed this as a bonus point category. The group discussed whether to have this as bonus points or a separate category of the SEQP. The consensus was a separate category of the SEQP is probably best. Steve and Gary will work over the next week to figure out, or let's see, to make recommendations on how to best include this in the SEQP and to work out exactly what the how the QSOs for this type of contact would work. Okay. Nathaniel recommended that if we have a number of different categories / activities in the SEQP, we should probably publish a recommended band plan so that each of the activities do not interfere with each other. Let's see. Robinette came on towards the end. He is still going to review the current draft of the SEQP rules and make suggestions for WhisperNet. He will also make suggestions for incorporating GNSS locked FS4W transmissions. Rob provided information on possible sources of GNSS locked transmitting hardware. And what was the source you were recommending?
Yeah, the QDX, QRP Labs, QDX is, I think, the
Labs
QRP Labs is, yeah. Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Did I capture the essence of everything we talked about today? And then also say, Nathaniel will work over the weekend to come up with a draft of the NASA proposal. Sound good?
Good.
All right. So I'll let you, Gary, are you guys going to stay and chat any longer, or should I shut down the meeting?
Steve, you want to talk for a couple minutes? Or you want me to draft something up first and send it to you?
Yeah, let's do that.
The draft first? Okay, I'll work on the draft.
Okay. And let me know if you want anything else from me. I
Will
think we
do.
had some good ideas today.
That sounds great. So in that case, I'll close out the meeting then, and thank you very much, everyone. I'll post the recording later tonight or tomorrow. It's like takes a little while to get all of it processed, and I'll send out the minutes once it's all posted. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Have a great day, everyone. 7:30.
Yeah.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
73.